Welcome to this episode of the Biometrics Leadership Lab Live. We are here to support you on your biometrics journey, giving you the tools and knowledge you need to grow from lead to leader. And today we are focused on jobs. We will be discussing topics related to the current job market and how you can position yourself for success. My panel today includes two professional recruitment specialists, and we've got some great topics lined up. Thank you for joining us live. And if you're watching a replay, thank you for taking the time to catch up. You can ask questions on the event notice on LinkedIn, and we will see them, but we can't respond in writing while live. So if we don't answer your question, we'll answer it after the event, either in the comments or an upcoming edition of our newsletter. Before we get started, let's do introductions. I'm Amanda Cross, founder of Crossfield Coaching and Consulting, a biometrics and clinical data advisory dedicated to helping small, mid-sized companies and teams manage their data risk, integration, oversight, and governance. With decades of experience in clinical research, from statistician to chief operating officer, I leverage my cross-functional experience and training to help teams integrate, communicate, and collaborate in order to improve and ensure data integrity. And now to our panelists. Daniel?
Sure, thank you. And thanks for having me back. Nice to be here again. Daniel Cheetham, biometrics specialist headhunter. Been in the industry now for over 15 years. Began over in the UK, recruiting into the European biometric market, and then made the leap over to the US in 2017 and have been here since. I now run my own business, again, focused on biometrics solely, both contract, hourly rate, consulting roles, as well as full-time permanent positions from a handful of years experience all the way through to heads of department, exec director, and VP.
Thanks for having us on, Amanda. My name is Mark O'Brien. I'm the CEO of Warman O'Brien. We're a specialist life sciences staffing company. We operate in over 25 countries. We place contractors, permanent staff, not just within biometrics, but across the full drug development life cycle, working from anything from a stealth mode company to a big pharma. And delighted to be on the panel again. And thanks for having us back. I'm looking forward to this session.
Yeah, thanks both for coming back. And I would just want to give a plug here because Mark and I actually recorded a podcast late, I think in 2025, about CVs and how to present yourself on LinkedIn. So if you are getting ready to make a move and you want some information on how to position on paper, be sure and give that a listen. Okay, first question for you guys today is what changes are you seeing in the market since we last spoke about jobs in September of 2025?
Yeah, I suppose when we were chatting back in September, we did talk about AI, but very briefly. But I think it's definitely stepped up in the last few months, from what I can see at least anyway. I know from going to conferences last year, a lot of the working groups were talking about it. But what we're seeing now is actually programmers, statisticians, and DM using it on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just about talking about it. People are actually using it on a day-to-day basis. So that's definitely something that we're noticing. There's still obviously the trepidation about what does that mean? What does that mean for their role, whether you be a programmer, statistician, or a data manager? We haven't seen too many changes just yet, but it's definitely impacting everybody. And it's about how you embed it within your role moving into the next few months as well. So definitely embracing it is what we've seen it, and what a lot of people are adopting it. And then it's just a matter of about how are you using it, whether you've been in QC to work, but certainly we're seeing a lot more interaction within using it, and lots of people are embracing it. Some people are still a bit worried about what that means it is, but I definitely think people need to get on board a lot more than some do.
Mark, Daniel, before you answer, I just want to ask Mark, do you see it impacting like the number of roles that are out there, or more that companies are requiring you to have some level of experience in using AI?
I think there's a bit of a holding patterns with some companies about trying to maybe have more efficiencies using AI rather than hiring more people. So that's definitely one thing with certain companies we're seeing it. And then there's obviously that move towards low-cost countries as well within certain companies, whether it be CROs or pharmas. So that's having an impact. There are still many roles, and they're just probably not as the volume as probably what we saw a couple of years ago. But there's still opportunities for candidates. It's just it's probably not as bountiful as there were before.
I think what I'm seeing is a continued move and leaning into contract and fractional work. So companies don't have the headcount still. Contractors' hourly rate, consultants offer a bit more flexibility from that perspective. It appears in a different place on the balance sheet, of course. And so I think that will continue through this year and potentially will balance out maybe in 27 and beyond. But certainly, I think I've since when we last spoke in September, contract has been a big area that I've been seeing clients need help with. Another couple of areas, the hybrid. So I think the fully remote times that COVID brought are probably behind us now. The needle's moved back towards the expectation that people should be working on site. Certainly on the sponsor side, I think on the CRO side, you tend to see positions be remote. The days of 5 days in office, I'd say, are probably behind us as well. And the new normal's more about 2 to 3 days. And I'd say fully remote, whilst it does exist, is probably an outlier. And then finally, interestingly, actually, what I'm seeing is that recruitment processes overall on contract and on the permanent side are actually taking longer. So recruitment processes now are at least 3 to 4 stages, with each stage being maybe 2 to 3 people being met. And so that overall means that recruitment processes from CV send through to offer take several weeks more than perhaps they did in previous years. And you'd think that with the availability of candidates, because there have been so many layoffs in the industry, that this would be quicker, but that's not quite the case. I think companies are being a lot more methodical and deliberate with how they hire.
Are you seeing that across levels?
Yeah, all levels, from a couple of 3 years experience all the way through to heads of department. Yeah.
There's certainly more approvals needed as well. I think that's one thing that we know it's definitely taking longer, and you're just needing more approvals than before. So it's making decisions. It's more challenging as well to manage candidates. If candidates are in multiple opportunities, then that makes it challenging managing their expectations as well, as far as when they're actually going to go final interview, when they'll expect an offer. So yeah, a lot more due diligence than we had probably in the past.
Yeah, and certainly with, I guess, let us just say less work floating around industry, particularly CRO side, there isn't that pressure to hire, right? Like during COVID times, there's a lot of pressure to get bodies in the seat and get people working, and you could move a lot quicker. And now there's a little bit more time to take a breath and be methodical about who you're hiring and what that will look like. The hidden job market, which I think is much more relevant the higher you go in terms of level, about these jobs, we all know you're supposed to get a job before they're even posted, right? So how, when, where do you hear about these roles? How do you know they're going to be posted? How do you hear about them early? How can candidates learn about them?
Well, I think the way to look at it is to look at a role before a role becomes a role, before there's a job description written, before it's even signed off. And before that, you look at a business need. So maybe look at where funding has recently landed for an organization. Perhaps look at an organization that has won a new client or a new project or suite of projects. Perhaps somebody has elevated and been promoted into a new position, creating potentially a new need. Maybe there's a capability gap that's been identified. And those are the kind of key needs that create then a vacancy. So looking for those in the industry is where you uncover as you said, the hidden job market.
Yeah, I think something similar to that as well. It's building that relationship. I think from a recruitment perspective, building a relationship with the decision makers, hiring managers, heads of clinical development, etc. That's a key thing for ourselves, knowing what type of roles are going to be coming up in the future. So usually they don't get passed on to HR until further down the line. So if you've got a good relationship with a decision maker, then you have a good idea of what roles are going to be coming up whether depending on the funding, if it's a biotech, whether it be a moving to phase two study. So if you have a good relationship with some of the decision makers, that definitely gives you an upper hand on what roles are likely to be coming up in the next 3 months, 6 months. And then that's just a matter of building relationships with directors, senior directors, heads of, so that a lot of them are passive candidates. They're not actively looking. So it's kind of giving them an idea of what roles might be coming up to see if they're interested in applying. So yeah, it doesn't usually tend to hit LinkedIn until quite late. And then you almost have shortlists of candidates at that stage as well. So it's about, as a candidate perspective, building a relationship with other specialist recruiters, but also building your network within that senior leadership team within an organization.
Yeah, and if you're a candidate and your goal is to work with a small biotech, as an example, if you're somebody who wants to lead a brand new function, set up a biometrics function for a small biotech, my advice there would be, as Mark said, build some relationships. But what you could also be doing is look at the news, look at companies that are going through their IPO, look at companies that are getting funding and where they are through the R&D process, and perhaps if they're approaching phase 2 or phase 3, that's the kind of key point when a company begins thinking about, right, how are we going to structure our biometrics function? Are we going to outsource all of it to CRO? Are we going to have a more hybrid approach? Are we going to approach it from a fractional standpoint where we bring in a consultant or bring on somebody permanent? So those are the kind of the key flags that I think the advice I would give somebody who's looking for that type of role. And obviously there's different types of flags that you've been looking at for other roles as well.
Yeah, the network is huge. Obviously, as you go up or you're looking for a broader role, who you know that can open that door for you, or who might know of a role. And at some point you get people just like you and they want to make a role for you. And so it becomes important to keep that network up. I love the tip about following the news. It's easy to set up an internet search, a news search for funding on biotechs or specific companies you're working for, to see what's going on, to help shake out maybe when they might be ready to hire. But let's talk about these candidates. What makes somebody easy to place versus, I soften this a little bit, just maybe not as easy or harder to place?
Well, something to start. Hard to place. Yeah, there's definitely distinct differences between when you especially look at a resume or a CV from a candidate's perspective. Lots of red flags definitely make it harder to place. And what I mean by that is if there's gaps in CVs, that's definitely one question mark I'd have pretty quickly. So it doesn't mean you can't place those type of candidates, but you've got to the candidate has to have a specific reason why there's a gap in a CV. Obviously, there's genuine reasons or what have you, but in many instances, they're either hiding away from the fact that whether they're redundant and stuff like that, and they were finding it hard to find a job, but more about whether they're plodding along and they haven't been pushing themselves in the role that they've been doing as well. So I think the key thing from a hard to place kind of is making sure that you give specific reasons about why there's gaps in your CVs, why you haven't been promoted recently or what have you. So that's going to be making sure you manage your expectations and align with what the reality is within the market as well. So it's just make sure you're clear on what you're doing.
So what I tend to look for, you can distill it down into two areas. As Mark says, the CV, somebody's background. So have they demonstrated longevity at the companies they've been with, or have there been unavoidable job hops? Because there are some situations where it's totally unavoidable, you get laid off. Some people get unlucky and that happens in succession. But looking at somebody's CV is where I always start. Do they have the relevant skills? Have they worked with reputable companies? And then there's the other aspect, and that is the intangible piece. So it's more their behaviors. How do they communicate? Do they have a willingness to look at an opportunity holistically, rather than just, say, looking for a bump up in salary? Are they looking for the overall opportunity as a whole? And then are they flexible in terms of what they're looking for, rather than just being kind of laser focused on one single thing? Are they responsive? For us as headhunters, as recruiters, we want to build relationships with candidates who are responsive, who come back to emails and phone calls and communicate how they're feeling throughout the process. That makes our lives infinitely easier because we can then work with them and relay that onto the client as well to get them as much as the best opportunity. So two areas: the CV, the kind of words on paper, call it, and then there's the intangible piece.
I want to highlight the piece about the being engaged with the communication. You said it differently, but that's the word that came to me. Because
Yeah.
I've coached some people, or I've known people who are looking for jobs, and they let, it's no big deal for them to let like a day and a half or 2 days go by before they check their email. And it's like, if you're actively looking for a role and people are actively communicating to you, or trying to contact you, given how many candidates are out there, if you're not being responsive, it's very easy for a company to just move on to the next candidate, or you'll be seen as potentially not that responsive. So you want to avoid that. I want to also bring up kind of the job hopping and the tenure. It's pretty well known that if you really want to make the salary bump, you're going to have to leave companies, unfortunately. And so I think people, particularly, and maybe I'm misreading it, but I think early and mid-career, you'll see a lot of people hopping around a lot to get that salary bump. What's too much hopping, right? What raises the flag?
So anything less than 3 years. Anything less than 3 years with a company is something that will need to be discussed at interview. If you're going to discuss it at interview, it's important that you're able to discuss it fluently and confidently. And the reason for moving can't just be, I wanted more money, or I moved for a better opportunity. Perhaps you can say that once or twice throughout your career, but if that's the sole reason that you're seen to be moving during an interview process, the hiring manager is going to raise some flags.
I think one thing within the CV and having promotions, how many promotions have you had in each role as well? It's not good to go from statistician to senior statistician from one company to another, then go to principal, then go to AD. If you've not demonstrated promotions within at least one or two of those companies, that would be a question mark I would have with a candidate about why haven't they been promoted within their current companies? If they've had to move to get promoted for a bigger job title, bigger salary, that doesn't demonstrate. I think from some companies at least, they'll be worried about, okay, well, how long are they going to stay within that role, and why haven't they been promoted within that company as well? So making sure that there's logical progression within some of the companies they've worked with. But yes, you obviously can move for a role and salary, but sometimes you need that longevity and logical progression within a company as well to show that they're easier to place candidates.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, Mark. Sorry, Amanda. The promotion thing is, whilst it's not always possible to be promoted at your company, showing that you've stepped up once or twice or a few times in your career, clients really like that. They really like to see that progression.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's a little bit different if you see somebody early in their career who's jumping around, because they probably are doing that for experience and money, which is understandable when you're in your younger years. And then I think that tenure becomes more important as you are growing throughout your career. I mean, way back in the day, we used to say 7 years of experience is not the same as 1 year of experience at 7 different companies over 7 years, because you have to settle in and you have to learn what's going on and you have to gain that exposure to what's happening that you just get through repeated exposure and repeated practice within a company.
And I think for candidates, well, having realistic expectations, that's the one thing that you do notice from candidates is when they're looking for a director title, or they're an AD at the moment, they want a director, and it's just on managing their expectations about why they're not ready to move into a director level role. So it's about make sure you're clear on why you feel that they're not ready to move into that role and what they need to do to get to that director role. So some people are very much job title focused, but they're not actually doing that role at the moment. I know we'll probably go into it a little bit later, but
yeah, I have that. I'm going to segue right into that, but I also am going to make one point just to carry something through, which, because Daniel was talking about it, is the story. Know what you're telling when you left a job. Why did you leave a job? What were you looking for? What was going on? Why weren't you promoted at a company you worked at for 3 years, right? There could be a moratorium on promotions at that company, right? Through no fault of your own. But know the story and be confident in the story and the way in which you are positioning it. And don't be afraid to record yourself practicing that story. You want to have your talking points. You want to be sure that you're conveying yourself professionally and cleanly and coherently. And because Mark brought that up, so I'm going to jump right to that, which is that step up role. And if you are an individual contributor trying to become a manager, or you're a manager trying to become an AD, or an AD to director, what's working and not working with candidates who are looking to make those changes?
Well, I think first and foremost, companies, when looking at a step-up role, companies want to see proof that you've been operating at that role, that level already. As a very basic example, if somebody is looking to step into a formal people leadership role, 9 times out of 10, if they can't demonstrate they have led a team, they have managed people from direct reports in the past, they're not going to see success in either the application or if they get to interview at the interview stage. So it's all about showcasing where you've been able to do that either formally or informally in the past to be able to kind of level up and step up.
I think the one thing is demonstrating capability within the role, as kind of Dan alluded to. So it's not just about listing the tasks; it's about how have you taken ownership within and articulate that ownership within the role as well. So it's not saying you're ready, but showing how you are already doing that and how you're doing it at the moment. So managers don't really promote on desire; they promote on how you've actually demonstrated within the role you're doing at the moment. Otherwise, you're not going to get that either promotion or step up into a director level role, for example.
And this kind of links back to what we were saying a little bit earlier about thinking about and preparing. So if you haven't necessarily had a formal, again, using people leadership as an example, if you haven't had a formal people leadership role, how can you prepare examples ahead of interviews or on your CV where you have fulfilled that? So the preparation piece there is important if you're targeting a step up.
Yeah, I've made 2 notes here, and one is definitely on showing how you can lead a team and motivate people even in a matrix environment. I talk a lot about improving cross-functional communication and what is everybody working towards with data. Like programmers should talk to data management should talk to statistician. How do you facilitate that communication? So, or even if you were a lead programmer and you were helping, leading a team of 4 or 5 programmers to deliver a massive deliverable, that highlights your ability to lead and motivate a team. So it's really, how do you pull that through, just as Daniel said. And the other thing I like to think about is know why you really want that step. There's a lot of growth of, well, I've been a junior, I've been an on-roll, I've been a senior, I've been a principal, it's time to be a manager. But why do you want to be a manager? Do you actually want to manage? Do you actually want to be a director and lead departments, or do you want to achieve something else? And there's a difference between being ready to or wanting to be a director versus just looking for that next promotion. So I think it's around being clear of what you're trying to achieve in any level that you're looking to increase.
I think the one thing with Amanda is having the relationship with your line manager to understand what's the path to the next level, and actually having a development plan in place with your manager and reviewing it on a quarterly or a 6-monthly basis, so that you can see how you're progressing to that next role. So I think rather than focusing on the destination, focusing on the career development plan or path within that. And I think that definitely makes a big difference when we're speaking to candidates about what clients are looking for, is having that clear plan in place with your hiring manager. So at least then if you're ready to step up into the next level.
Yeah, and a lot of it is so much more for the job hunt now and CV and how you present yourself is accomplishment based. What did you do? What did you deliver? better than expected? How did you save money? How did you make things more efficient? What did you accomplish on your job, as opposed to the list of responsibilities you may or may not have done from your job description. So the more that you can quantify what you've accomplished, the better you will position yourself, I think, for telling your story, as well as being someone who is outcomes focused, which becomes more important as you go up the ladder.
I think it's worth noting as well that the what you accomplish should not just be in the core focus of your role. It could be what value are you adding to the wider organization? What value are you adding to the wider team outside of your day-to-day job description, for example? And those are the kind of the key sweeteners, call them, that organizations like to see and like to hear about, certainly in interview.
All right, beyond the CV, what differentiates candidates in interviews and conversations, either with you or with a hiring company?
I think the interview, verbal skills, communication skills, that's probably the most fundamental part of it. You can have a great resume, CV, it looks good on paper, but it's how you actually communicate that on an interview, an interview panel. So that comes down to preparation as well. And that's working with a recruiter or to help you plan, prepare for that interview, so that when you do, can demonstrate not just the task, but how you've taken ownership and influence within the role. And that makes a big difference. So I think it's going into detail about what you'll be doing, and that shows a lot of leadership within the role also. So it does depend on what level you're moving into, but it's making sure that you've clearly owned and developed the idea and to be able to convince people. I'm thinking more of on the biostat side, but that's certainly something that you need to go into the detail and how you went about and did it, how you've influenced, how you've owned that idea as well. So that will demonstrate a big selling point when you're actually going for interviews.
I think what differentiates candidates as well, it depends on the level, right? So the more junior level, it's tactical. The more senior level, it's strategic, thinking of where you've accomplished in those particular areas. And as Mark says, the communication piece. Biometrics is such a technical niche in the industry that communication is arguably the single biggest point of failure for candidates at interview. They can have phenomenal backgrounds, have achieved superb things throughout their career, but then if they can't communicate that in an interview format, that's where they fall short. So the line that I always come back to is, can you communicate technical concepts to people who aren't technically minded effectively? So as Mark said, the communication piece. Additionally, interview-wise, we've kind of touched upon it already, is prepare, and prepare, over-prepare. I can't stress that enough. There's been too many occasions in the past where I've worked with people who are rightly really well experienced, who are fairly well on in their career. They're at a senior level in the industry, so they've seen a lot and therefore had quite a lot of interviews themselves. And occasionally they can perhaps then not prepare enough for interviews. So things like looking through your CV. I mean, obviously you've lived your background, you've lived your CV, so you know it. But again, to use an example, if you were to ask me what I was doing in a recruitment project 6 years ago, I'd struggle to tell you. But if you gave me an hour beforehand just to think, look at my own CV, make a few notes about the clients I was working with, the searches I was working on, and then you were to ask me the question, it would be at the forefront of my memory. So prepare, look through your own background, maybe make some notes of some key achievements so that you can relay it better. So again, can't stress it enough, prepare for interviews.
It's such an important point, because there's so many candidates competing for those roles at every single level now, where, even just a few years ago, you could, open jobs, I didn't say they were just plentiful, but they were so much more prevalent, and you weren't having as much competition, and you're competing against people who are more experienced than you for the role for which you are perfectly qualified. So if the role requires 5 years of experience and you've got 6, you're looking really good. But here comes somebody who was laid off last year, who has 8 or 9 years of experience and is willing to do the job for that money. So you might get edged out. So preparation is key. Like I said, video yourself, answering questions, know the stories you want to tell. The STAR response gets a lot of information. And I'll give a little AI plug here because people think, what should I do with AI? You can really use AI to help you position yourself and craft your stories. You can tell it, here's the job I'm interviewing for, here's my CV or my background, you're the hiring manager, what are you asking me? And you don't want to use their words, verbatim, because they sound AI-ish, but they really can help you craft your response in a coherent way and help you prepare, which is great if you're going on your own and not working with a recruiter.
It's giving you some prompts to work towards. And I think what Dan alluded to is obviously if you've done the preparation, it does become a lot more flow conversation rather than scripted as well. I think it's one thing to bear in mind.
And another little, I mean, we could probably do an hour on interview preparation alone, but a little top tip on that I've seen with a lot of candidates quite recently is stay on topic, because people, I'm finding recently, because of layoffs and people not having a job, when they do get an interview, they're so hyper focused on getting it, and so therefore so hyper focused on getting across their skills and experience that they'll start talking, and then before they know it, 10 minutes has gone by and the interviewer hasn't gotten a word in edgeways. So yes, talk through your background in some really good depth, but stay on topic.
Yeah, know the question they're asking you and then answer that question based on your experience and carry that through. So you can even, if you want to make sure you're framing your response correctly, take a beat and say, I heard you ask about XYZ, right? That makes sure you're hearing them and it gives you a beat to respond. And if they're asking about, I'm raising this because it came up with somebody I know recently, but if they're asking you about some experience you've had in your, let's just say, mid to distance past, but is really relevant for them, there might be a concern that your experience is too old. But the way to get over that, or a way to get over that, is to show that you know what the current workings of that item are. Have the regulations changed? Has the technology changed? Has the analysis methodology changed? Show that you know how it's carrying through, because it shows to hiring companies that you are staying on top of what's going on in your field, even if you're not able to apply it on a day-to-day basis.
I think one thing to do as well is, when you know who's going to be involved in the interview process, is doing your research on that person. Look them up on LinkedIn, look at their background. If there's any kind of icebreakers you can use on it, if they're know similar people, if you've been to similar conferences, whichever working group you've worked within, specific therapeutic area aligned. There's a lot of things that can help you just get the conversation going and be comfortable on an interview format. Especially if you haven't interviewed for quite a long time. So that does make a difference when you get an idea who you're going to be speaking to. You've had a look at their background, their profile on LinkedIn, and there might be some common ground straight away before you go straight into the technical side of it.
And if you're working with a recruiter, every recruiter worth their weight should speak to you and run through interview preparation before every single interview. So if they haven't booked in an interview call with you, if you are working with a recruiter, reach out to them. Ask them, do you have 10 minutes, do you have 15 minutes to run through some interview preparation with me? And if they're not proactively guiding you and running through set questions with you, maybe ask them to actually kind of lead them to helping you, help them help you.
Yeah, and I would say if your recruiter's not doing that, then maybe you should find an additional recruiter to work on your behalf. Because a recruiter should, when you're working with one and you have an interview, should come to you. Here's who you're talking with. Here's what's important to them. Here's how to position yourself to make sure you hit their key issues and requirements. And if you don't have that, it's like a little extra bit going into an interview that gives you an edge.
I think it'll be sometimes certain recruiters do assume that because they have the skill set, their CV matches a job description, that it's just a matter of jumping on the interview without actually done the preparation. So yeah, that does make a big difference, where you have a recruiter who's specialist in an area that can kind of go beyond that and really prepare you for the interview. And that, especially when there's competition, a lot more competition than before. So you just can't assume that because you can do the role doesn't mean you're going to get the role.
So let's talk about recruiters a little bit more, because certainly you can go the look, plenty of people get jobs on their own. They don't go through the recruitment process with an external recruiter or recruitment agency. But why should you work with a recruiter? How should you work with one strategically? And how do you build that relationship when you're not looking for a job?
So I guess it's worth pointing out, thank you, is that a recruiter, a headhunter recruiter, their role is not to find jobs for candidates. Their role is to find candidates for their clients. So the best way that candidates can position themselves to have meaningful, genuine relationships with recruiters is to put time into those relationships. Not everybody, because there are so many of us, but key people that you buy into, and build a genuine relationship with them, so that they, you know, they think of you when a new position comes up, and they know what would pique your interest, so they know to come to you with when a new position comes up. So being proactive rather than reactive, and you know, the best relationships with recruiters are not built in rough seas. They're built when you know, you're not in crisis mode.
I think the lucky thing is, having been in the industry for so long, I've been to many different conferences. So you do build up that network over the years. So you do know lots of these people already. So it does make a difference. So that a lot of them are passive candidates and are not actively looking. So they're proactively in touch with you, whether it be they're looking for a job themselves, or whether they're their decision maker and they're looking for people within their team as well. So the key thing is to be in touch on a regular basis. If you can, update you when things change, be honest about your situation. Some of the best candidates have more than one option. So it's about making sure that you're front and center with working with those candidates, so that you have a couple of different options for them. So, but I think the key thing is the stronger candidates don't just call when they're desperate. So just make sure that you stay in touch and be clear about where you're heading.
And coming at it from a candidate's perspective as well, what we're not suggesting that candidates should do is to give their favorite recruiter a call every week saying, do you have more jobs for me? Do you have more jobs? But instead, just stay in touch every now and again, so that you're at the forefront of their mind, but balance it so that it's not, as I said, not every week. And that way, yeah, they're gonna keep you in mind.
Yeah, I found, you know, being strictly candidate side, never being recruitment side, there are definitely recruiters in my network who I've built up a relationship over years, right? I've seen them at some conferences. They've reached out to me on LinkedIn. Maybe we chat in person every 6, 9, 12 months. And I just mean, you know, like by a phone call. As a candidate, though, regardless of what level of career you're at, don't be afraid to meet with a recruiter or to, you know, engage with a recruiter if they're reaching out, because as Daniel said, their job is to find candidates for their clients. And so it's okay to say, oh, I'm not looking right now, but here's what I like doing, and here's what might interest me to get me to move. Because, you know, now it's a win for everybody. You know what you want to do in the future. You've got a recruiter or 2 or 3 who know the types of things that might be worth piquing your interest, and those connections will pay off over time.
I think some of the passive candidates are some of the strongest candidates. So building that relationship with those type of people at the time will pay off down the line as well.
Yeah, being willing to talk to a recruiter, maybe when they don't have a vacancy right now, just having a conversation and building that relationship, as we said, but also making sure they know what your background is, they know what you've done, your skills, your experience, so that when the right thing comes up, they can reach out.
All right, and this is a hot topic right now. Speaking as an American sitting in America, with everything moving to lower cost regions, and so how can candidates in high cost regions really position themselves to stand out against that?
Yeah, you're right. It is a very emotive subject in the conversations that I'm having with my friends, my industry friends, because of what's happened over the last couple of years. Certainly I mean, the industry has always lent into offshoring in some degree, but over the last couple of years, Big Pharma and CRO really have lent in more. So yeah, very emotive. But I guess first and foremost, in a country like the US, that is considered high cost, don't compete on price, because you're never going to win that battle. The things that you want to be competing on are complexity of skill set, are communication ability and effectiveness, and also opportunity to lead and lead effectively. Not necessarily manage people like we spoke about earlier, but what I've seen over the last few years is hands-on roles being offshored, and the more study or project leadership level and upwards positions remaining onshore. So how can you demonstrate that you can add value in one of those three areas so that your role isn't offshored?
I think it's about how do you improve efficiency, and that's going to be the key thing, because there's certainly, yes, lower cost regions are going to win in many ways. So the leadership part of what Dan alluded to is how can you show that leadership and how to improve that efficiency, so that it's obviously you're comparing talent across different multiple areas. So it's about how do you impact within that role as well. So they're not going to look at location as much. So how do you differentiate yourself and add that value? And a lot of it's going to come down to how you're improving efficiency within that environment.
Yeah, on the subject of adding value, like we were saying earlier, outside of your job, your job description, call it, how are you adding value outside of that to the wider business, to other teams, to other functions? How are you making other people's lives more straightforward and more productive and more efficient through what you're doing?
I always feel that there's going to be a place for people in high cost regions, if for no other reason. And again, I'm so far CRO side of my experience, it's almost 100% there. The sponsor is going to call somebody at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and they're going to want somebody to answer the phone. And that's the space and the opportunity you have in the US, is that you are there, you are able to answer their question, you are able to facilitate forward progress on whatever the issue is, even if you are working asynchronously with a global team. And so that becomes the position. I'm just going to flat out say, we are not going to talk about here what that means in 10 or 15 years when the current people doing this have grown in their careers and there's nobody left in the US or Europe and higher markets to do this activity. I mean, I think the market will shake something out and something will happen there. That is a pressure that will have to be explored. But in the meantime, you want to be positioning yourself as someone who can coordinate global teams, who can solve problems when a sponsor calls, who can position teams to work better together. And since we're talking a little bit about this, what does it mean to be hard to lose, right? Like, I want to think for a second how to position this, because you're obviously trying to get people to leave their roles. Their companies would probably want them to stay. What makes you that person that the company really considers somebody hard to lose?
I think you could distill it down into three areas. One area, technical ability in your chosen niche, in your role. Are you strong technically? Second piece is the communication aspect. So can you, like I said earlier, can you communicate technical subjects to non-technical folk? Can you be the glue in a project team? I think finally, is again, I mentioned it already, is the adding value outside of your single function. Are you looked at by other members of the team, maybe even senior leadership, as, Daniel's great at what he does. He doesn't just do his own work. He really helps me do my work and makes me more effective. I think that's really when people are assets, when they're adding value outside of their normal day job.
I think it varies depending on what level you're coming in at as well. So, for example, if you're mid-level statistician, for example, it's having autonomy. It's about not being able to hold your hand, etc. It's taking ownership. So, and then how you challenge whatever the subject is. But in more senior level, it's more about the trust. So whether you're working with a small biotech and you're reporting to the board, does someone trust you? Can you confidently represent the biometrics function? Are you the go-to person when things get complex? So there's a number of different reasons at what level you're coming in at. So certainly with mid-level, it's more about autonomy and ownership, and at senior level, it's definitely more about trust.
And I think the key here as a leader of these teams is somebody's going to dangle something in front of your highest performer, your most valued employee, and lure them away. And it's incumbent on you as a manager or leader, whatever level you are at in that role, to understand what's motivating your employees, to understand what they want to achieve at the company, and understand what's going to keep them engaged and interested in continuing to work, so that they feel that they're valued. That's a little bit from the other side, but I think ultimately, as an American, we're all going to move our jobs along the way. And so 9 times out of 10, it's nothing personal. It's just a chance to try out something new.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the other side there, Amanda, because some of the people that might be watching today or in the future might be leaders themselves and might need to hear this, that to reduce turnover, you need to there's so many things you can focus on, but culture, having people feel as though they're part of a tribe in the company that they're working with, is so important. And then I think Mark alluded to it a little bit earlier on, having people have a career map. If somebody's just turning up to work and doing their job and going home and that's it, or stepping away from the home office and that's it, we want people actually feeling as though they're pressing towards a group goal for the company, for their tribe, but also they're driving towards career advancement, and they know what they need to achieve to be able to get there. Those are the people that tend to stay put. The people that are more open to leaving don't feel a kind of a connection with the company, and also don't know what's next for them in their own career. So something else will draw them away.
Okay, Mark mentioned this a little bit when he was talking about what he's noticed changing since September, which is how AI is impacting the roles. But beyond like the recruitment process, meaning like an AI screener on CVs coming in or anything like that, how do you see AI changing biometrics roles themselves? What are you hearing from companies when they're looking for candidates?
Yeah, I don't think AI is going to remove roles as such, particularly within biostats, but it's definitely changing them. So I'm speaking to lots of decision makers in the last few weeks. Yeah, they're definitely embracing, as I kind of alluded to, a lot more. They're definitely using a lot more. It's not just the working groups that are using it. So that's one thing we're noticing. Programming is becoming more automated. So there's definitely a skill set movement within there. But I think the one thing that they definitely say is what won't be automated is judgment. So it's about having people who can ask the right questions, understand the limitations, and obviously maintaining that regulatory integrity. So certainly, yeah, that's going to be the thing, is rather than answering the questions, about making sure you're asking the right questions. I think even when anybody within us, not even a statistician, is using ChatGPT, it's not just prompting them, it's about, are you asking the right questions to get the best use out of it? So I definitely think you're seeing it for statisticians and programmers, or even data managers, using AI more effectively, using it on a day-to-day basis, rather than adopting it, but using it each day. We're definitely seeing it. Maybe what we'll see is on the junior side of it, what a statistician will have done maybe 10 years ago as a junior who's graduated, compared to what they're doing now, is going to change. So how do we maybe develop strategic thinking earlier from a junior level, and maybe they weren't expected to do that 10 years ago? So I definitely see some changes within that, but it's about embracing it. I think that's definitely something we've noticed.
Yeah, I agree. It's the embracing thing, which is really important, and is often comes up in interviews, right? So if a candidate can't demonstrate that they embrace AI and have been using it effectively, then that is it's not a check mark against them. I'd say, like we said, the automation of repetitive tasks is where it's going to be impacting the roles. I'm not a data manager, programmer, or statistician, so I can't say kind of ground level what it will be doing, but I think that the repetitive aspect of any role is what's going to be worked on or looked at by AI. I think an interesting consideration with the advent of AI on the industry is the kind of the regulatory implications of AI. I think that will play out over the next year or two with health authorities like the FDA, for example, probably coming out with different guidance on how AI data should be used and QC'd. But for now, I think for advice to candidates is to adapt, is to embrace, and to learn, as Mark said, how to ask the right question to get the most out of AI in your work.
Oh, I'm going to put in some disclaimers because I say it every time we talk about AI. One, I wanted to say you guys are talking exactly how I always position it. Is you need to know how to use AI in your role or how you could use it, right? You're probably not going to lose your job to AI. Well, some people might. I mean, unfortunately, that's the way it is. But you want to be the person who knows how to use AI, and then you don't necessarily lose your job to AI. Second, here's the big disclaimer. Don't just run around throwing protocols into ChatGPT. Make sure you understand your company's policy for AI, their internal AI environment, if they have one, what you can and cannot use it for. Third, I think the comment on paying attention to what's coming out of the regulatory space, not just FDA, but any other regulatory bodies about AI and AI usage is really key, because even if you're not able to use it in your day-to-day, if you stay involved in what's happening, you will be able to form an opinion and input into how companies can potentially use it, which automatically makes you more valuable. And I've had so much interesting AI content come across my feed and my email and just my network lately. I'm going to package everything up and do a conversation on AI because it's really fascinating. And the one takeaway I've made is not as many people are using it effectively as you think. We all talk about it and we think, oh, everybody's using AI. There actually aren't that many people using it as you would think. And so understanding how you can interact with it can really become a valuable skill for you. Outside of AI, if someone's wanting to build a durable long-term career in biometrics, how should they be investing their energy over the next couple of years?
So it's a subject that's come up a fair bit already today. Communication, be that short-term, so preparation before interviews, but invest in your ability to communicate effectively. That is like I said at the start of the conversation, the single biggest point of failure for people at interview. Getting that bit down really will set you apart from your competitors in the industry, in the job market, call it. Another thing, this probably more applies to programmers and statisticians, adoption of R. The SAS versus R debate is still raging on. I don't think SAS is going to go away overnight, but I think the needle is moving towards more of a balance. There are some big sponsors out there that are leading the charge and even running SAS and R in parallel, and even requiring it from their vendors as a skill set. So I think R is something that I would probably suggest programmers and statisticians at the very least to get themselves nice and literate with.
Go back to the communication skills that Dan alluded to. So it's explaining technical insights to non-technical statisticians or stakeholders, influencing clinicians, influencing regulatory colleagues. It's about being able to push back. If you are obviously liaising with the FDA or any other industry body, it's about are you able to push back? Are you going to be steamrolled? I think that's the one thing that you get to notice a lot more when at interview stage, when you're writing what you're writing down in your CV, and about how you explain that on an interview panel as well. So definitely being able to communicate that effectively to non-technical is going to be a big difference. Regarding the broader drug development, so clinical design is a big part of it. Your commercial awareness. I think sometimes you get very technical statisticians who just are very focused on what they're doing without thinking the longer term, what's going to happen 1, 2, 3 years down the line. Are you thinking more on when you get to the end of phase 2 study? Are you thinking more about what does that phase 3 study look like? So certainly for statisticians at least. For programmers, of what Dan alluded to, being technically strong is very, very important, but obviously understanding FDA expectations around whether it be data integrity or oversight, that's going to be increasingly important. Learning, be multilingual. So rather than just being knowledgeable of SAS, but or Python, is definitely going to be a core part of it. We're definitely noticing you got differences between what a data scientist and what a statistician is. So you're getting lots of candidates who are pure statisticians, but then you're getting lots of candidates who've maybe come from a biology background who are moving into the kind of biometrics focused, who are passionate about the industry, but are coming from a data science background. So you're definitely seeing a few changes within the industry, but there's still lots of opportunities within both stats and programming and data management. But it's just about how you're learning new languages, not just be reliable on SAS or even R.
So I did a really popular session on R last year, and I'm bringing that guest back in probably over the next couple months to talk about what's changed, because I think a lot has changed, and I think the uptake is much quicker. I don't talk to anybody lately without them asking me my opinion on R and what it looks like to transition to R. And we have a comment online where somebody's saying Roche has changed their entire pipeline to R. So there have been successful regulatory submissions over R. They will continue. So it is really time to think about how you are implementing that. The other two other pieces of, or maybe three pieces of advice I would say, this is kind of, it's very generic, silly advice for statisticians. I fully acknowledge that. But there's a lot of conversation around Bayesian methods, and there's a lot of conversation about different methodologies, and understand how methodologies are changing. I often say I could not work as a statistician anymore because the methods I used when I was a working statistician have all evolved and they've changed, right? We were ride or die on ProcGLM, and it's just not really used anymore, and or as frequently. So understand how the methodology and handling of statistics is changing in industry. The second thing for communication, like my membership is not active right now, but Toastmasters is really good for that. It can help you speak extemporaneously. It can help you prepare stories and little speeches and how you want to present yourself. A lot of practice in how you can make technical points to non-technical people through your speeches. So I'm going to give it a plug. I don't get paid to say that, but it is really helpful for communication. And the other component is understand how you can impact your organization's adoption of ICH E6 R3, because data governance and the oversight responsibilities are not just a data management thing. They actually are, data governance belongs to everybody involved in the clinical trial process. So whether you're in biometrics or in ClinOps or in something else, you are impacting your organization's R3 compliance. And so understand how you can help that be successful.
A couple of other bits to tack on to the end there, sorry. We mentioned it a couple of times there, but pressing for exposure to the regulatory process, be it regulatory submissions, be it INDs, but getting any kind of exposure to that will help your career, regardless of what discipline of the three disciplines you're in. And then something we've mentioned throughout today, but not explicitly, is invest in your network. Invest in people that you've met throughout your careers. Like Mark mentioned, people that you've met at conferences. Invest in those relationships. It might seem pointless for now, but it will pay off dividends in the long term.
I think that
no matter how you feel when you're exiting a role, leave on good terms. I'm totally embarrassed to say this, but I have a terrible Reddit addiction. And so I'm always reading random stuff on Reddit. And I was reading this story about this guy who went into an interview, and it turned out the hiring manager turned out to be the manager who had laid him off from a job a couple of years ago. But he had really handled himself professionally on his way out, as disappointing as a layoff is. And they already had that trust and relationship built up. And so he got the job offer, of course, because they knew each other. But all we say, you're probably going to cross paths with everybody in this industry at least twice in your career. So you want that second touch point to have been built on professionalism and expertise in your field. So be careful whether you're coming in or leaving a company.
I think just on that, there's lots of different conferences, whether in the US or Europe. So there's lots of opportunities to present, exhibit, write a paper, whatever. There's a load of opportunities to be on any of the working groups as well. So that does help you massively down the line if you can demonstrate that on your resume or CV to show that you are building up a strong portfolio, and it opens up lots of different avenues, and especially if you're a specialist in one particular area, like within data transparency or within a certain stats methodology, whether it be Bayesian and that. So it does open up lots of avenues and doors if you are becoming an expert within one different area.
All right, we are at the top of the hour. So Mark or Daniel, was there anything you really wanted to say that you didn't get to say today?
Yeah, obviously the market is changing. We kind of mentioned it already. It's about how do you embrace AI, how do you embrace innovation, showing leadership in a role, whatever level you are within that. But I think communication is probably the key thing. We've probably mentioned it more than once. So it's just making sure whether you're at an interview stage or also within your role, having a clear development plan in place with your manager, and when you're moving up to new role as well. So a few things and nuggets to help you along the line.
Yeah, and a bit of positivity, I guess, because it's been a tough industry for the last almost 4 years. So, however, it does feel as though it's improving through the conversations I'm having with my key contacts. What I'm seeing out there, there is cautious optimism. It's not going to flip overnight, but again, just a little bit of injection of positivity.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody who is watching, and I want to thank all the comments. We had quite a few comments come through today, so I appreciate all of the interaction. There were a couple questions not answered, so we'll circle back and get them. But my thanks to Mark and Daniel for hanging out with me for an hour today and talking about jobs. And watch out for the next Leadership Lab Live. So I've got one coming on queries, which I can't wait for, and we are going to be talking about R again, and I am going to get to a discussion on AI. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye now.
See ya.